And welcome everybody to the latest episode of Union Federation here on the Fandom Podcast Network and the BQN networks. And we've got a show for you tonight, but this isn't just an ordinary episode of the Union Federation. Oh, no. Believe it or not, it is the 200th episode of Union Federation. Of course, about 60, 65 of those might have been gone under the name Discoville way back in the day. But you know what? It is exciting. It is our 200th episode. And, we're kind of kooky around here anyway. So what better way to cover the 200th episode of Union Federation, but to cover an episode of Lower Decks. And that's what we've got for you here as we continue our look at the final season of Lower Decks. This week, episode 3, the best Exotic Nanite Hotel. But I need a crew. And luckily, I have had an amazing crew throughout the entire run of Discoville and Union Federation, whether it's been myself, our former host Norman Lau, Kevin Reisel, who is in the land down under still and on a very special away mission. I think it might even be Section 31 involved, but not 100% certain. Either that or he's looking for some really good peak corner cleaning materials. It's one or the other. He won't tell me for sure. But I do have some of our mainstays here with us. Of course, she is our favorite holographic captain, and she is the ship counselor extraordinaire, the one and only queen of the BQN, Miss Amy Nelson.
Well, hello, and congrats on 200 episodes.
Yeah, I feel old, and I'm still trying to get my Boimler status up here, and it seems to be a work in progress. I do think I can grow to a beard a little faster than him, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But you know what, too? We need science on this ship, and there's nobody better to give us science. Plus, she is just a whiz on the phasers, and I don't leave her alone with paper cutters because bad things just tend to happen. But we love her anyway. It is the lovely and wonderful Miss Haley Stoddard.
200, woo 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 woo.
Yeah, I was gonna get some like vibe pipes to play and stuff like that, but you know what? They're really expensive on eBay. And lessons. But I'm just trying to find that inner chill, and I'm going to hopefully do it by the end of this podcast episode. Highly unlikely, though. This is the weirdest ship on the fleet. But you know what, guys? I am excited. It's been a lot of fun doing 200 episodes of Union Federation, and I'm looking forward to many more. And of course, the Union Federation podcast is covering not only everything that's happening in Star Trek, but we still do talk the Orville around here, and we've got some Orville-related projects coming up once we're done with the final season here of Lower Decks that are going to be a lot of fun. And Amy, I know you've been working with Kevin on some of those, and I'm looking forward to getting back to the Orville, and hopefully maybe in 2025 we finally get some news fully on a season 4. We're keeping our fingers crossed here because we do need more Orville in our lives. I need more Mercer. Thank you. And of course, you can find the Union Federation, like I said, on the Fandom Podcast Network. And it can also be found on the BQN network as well. Amy, I think about it, we're at our 200th episode of Union Federation. I think you've probably surpassed that with all the shows you have on the BQN episode count already over there. I mean, you've got some amazing things happening at the BQN.
We do. We've got some great YouTube shows, Trexperts Quiz, a really fun trivia show, and our View Screen, which is our morning talk show. And then we have on our podcast, we've got Infinite Diversity and All Good Things will be coming back in a couple weeks. So we've got a lot going on.
Yeah, and you guys do such a phenomenal job over there and have such a great diversity of shows over there. Yet all of them have that spirit of Trek, and it's so much fun with that. But I'm so proud of what you've done over at the BQN and what everybody does over there. They do a phenomenal job, and you know what? We always love it too when some BQN crossover comes over onto the Union Fed.
Yeah, we love our association with Fandom Podcast Network. So glad we're working together.
Oh, it's always a blast as always, but. We are here this week to talk Lower Decks. It is the final season. Now, I'm still a little sad about that. Lower Decks is much more fun than what I ever anticipated it to be. I need more. I need at least one more live action Lower Decks, though. I need a little bit more live action Boimler and all of that in my life. Maybe they can cross through that portal one more time, hang out with the cast of Strange New Worlds one more time before it's all said and done. But we'll see. But it is the final season of Lower Decks, and last week we had a little view screen problem, as you can see if you're watching on the YouTube video version of this. Our video screen is back up and running, and if you look behind me right now, one of the tribbles is trying to get into some trouble. So bear with me one second. I'm going to just keep him out of trouble here. Leave them alone for a minute and they multiply, guys.
Yes.
But you know what? They put out these wonderful posters kind of spoofing Lower Decks with some of the older Star Trek posters. Have you guys seen these? Because these are a lot of fun. You got the final season Lower Decks 5. You've got all kinds of, but it has that feel of the classic Trek poster. They really did a good job with this. And I love those little things that Lower Decks does. But
Yeah.
you know what? We also have some other things happening here around the Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, coming up, we just got done with a great limited run talking about the 2-part TNG episodes. But we talked about it just a few minutes ago, Amy. We're returning to the Orville once Lower Decks is wrapped up, and we're doing a 10-episode limited series with crew profiles on the Orville.
Yeah, this is going to be so much fun, and talking about each main character and some of the episodes that highlight their character and go through their arc, and get a good refresher course so that when we do get, because I am saying when and not if, when we do get that next season, we'll be ready to go with them fresh in our brains.
Yeah. Haley, when we start that run too, I'm going to need you around because I need somebody to open up all the jars of pickles for me.
Oh, you got it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're good. We're good there. And of course, too, we just wrapped up here on Union Federation. We did do every 2-part episode of The Next Generation. And Kevin really did a phenomenal job heading this up. But like I say, it was a lot of fun. I hadn't revisited TNG in a good while. So it was really fun to get back into some of these episodes. And I just want to throw this out, too. On our most recent episode of Culture Clash Live, which is on our Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, one of the hosts of Mission Log, and of course, a founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Norman Lau, joined us, and I was able to get out of him what his favorite 2-parter was, and he was even able to tell me after he told me what episode it was, what were the correct amount of lights in front of him, because yes, Chain of Command was Norman Lau's favorite 2-part episode.
Excellent. I'm glad you put him under the surveillance lights and got that out of him.
Oh, well, I don't think it's that hard to get Norman to talk about Star Trek, but yes,
True.
we did all of them, including Best of Both Worlds, Redemption, Unification. We had Time Zero, Chain of Command, Birthright, and then we even talked a little bit about what our other favorite Star Trek 2-part episodes were from some of the other series, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And I tell anybody, if you didn't get to watch those or haven't listened to them on the podcast feed, go back, take a listen to them. We had so much fun and we had so much passion for them.
Yeah.
And it was a great time all around for that. But guys, we are here to talk about Lower Decks, and I think it's time we get into it, which means it's away missions and so many other things. So I'm going to transport us into away mission number 1. And away mission number 1, as always here on the Union Federation podcast, means it's time for the Admiral's Log episode synopsis of episode 3 of season 5, The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel. I don't know if this is the brochures look good, Amy, but I'm not sure. So could you maybe go into the Admiral's Log and let us know if it was worth it to go to this hotel? Because it looked pretty nice, especially that diamond level. There's some cool stuff on the diamond level.
Yeah, sometimes you just can't trust those reviews, because
exactly.
There's some issues.
Yeah, make sure you've had nanite extermination. That's all I'm going to say. But Amy, if you would be so kind to give us the Admiral's Log this week.
Well, the crew are deployed to remove a nanite swarm in a space hotel. Mariner is dismayed when the mission is joined by Jennifer, an ex-girlfriend who Mariner ghosted. Jennifer acts as if they're still dating, and the others encourage Mariner to have a mature conversation and end things. Mariner avoids the confrontation, but her awkward, passive-aggressive behavior lets the nanites get out of control. Jennifer reveals she was just trying to force Mariner to talk about their breakup, and the two apologize to each other. Rutherford finds a way to disable the nanites, discovering that the swarm was controlled by a Starfleet ship from another parallel universe shrunk down to microscopic level. Jennifer and Mariner part amicably. Meanwhile, Boimler goes on a mission with Commander Ransom to locate an AWOL, Starfleet Admiral. Boimler begins to suspect that Ransom is treating him as cannon fodder and briefly sides with the Admiral, who says he left Starfleet out of resentment at being assigned low prestigious missions. Ransom admits that he brought Boimler because he's always prepared and wanted to give him the opportunity to showcase his bravery. Boimler subdues the Admiral and secures the mission.
Well, thank you for that, Amy. And this is an interesting episode of Lower Decks. They take these left-hand turns every once in a while, and usually it's pretty fun. This was definitely one of those left-hand turn episodes because I was not expecting, quite the Nanite Hotel experience that we got. Again, I think room service was and the cleaning crew at this hotel really need to probably be retrained for that Nanite problem. But guys, I am curious of what your thoughts were, so I'd love to get your first impressions of this episode. And Haley, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm not sure where I sit on it. I'm on the fence. I kind of liked it. I kind of didn't like it. I don't know. It's interesting. I liked the whole nanite thing, and it intrigues me as to how many nanites are in that cluster for it to be big enough to be visible. And so, I mean, I can only imagine. And again, our characters are kind of getting their little showcase. Mariner being forced to kind of grow up and act like an adult, while Boimler's trying to grow a mustache like an adult, is very, very interesting. And I will not be skiing. No, thank you.
What about you, Amy? Are you going to take a trip down the slopes here?
Oh, yeah. No. I did plenty of that up in Utah, so I've done my time there. Haley, I'm similar. I'm watched it now twice, and each time I'm like, okay, that's an episode. I love, again, and we talked about it last week, how I like the different combinations of how the pairings are. And they did it really fun this time with Ransom and Boimler. So Boimler was the one who was away. So I really did enjoy that. The Jennifer Mariner, I was okay with it. Just your typical misunderstanding, miscommunication. I sometimes get a little bored with that because it's just used a lot. So that was sort of my least favorite part. But the nanite thing was fun.
For me, I like the nanite thing. I kind of agree with both of you as far as like there's a hit or miss aspect of this episode. One of the things I really loved though was everything with our favorite Vulcan on Lower Decks and how she was fangirling out about as much as a Vulcan could in this episode, which I thought was a great little side story in itself. I think when I look at like the Mariner Jennifer relationship, it's about maturing these characters up still, and we see that with obviously Mariner in this episode. We see it with Boimler some more. I'd have to admit the Boimler side of it with Ransom was a lot more fun for me. It's because I love how those two play off of each other. And when the episode opens and Ransom selects Boimler for this episode, and then the other guy comes through and he's lost his hands, and I was like, yeah, I can see Ransom doing that actually. So, fly, canary, fly, as they were thinking in this episode. But yeah, I think for Lower Decks, this is one of those episodes. You've got just enough fun in it that makes it entertaining, but they've done better too. So, but with that, guys, I actually have done some research and I found some interesting trivia for this episode. So I'm going to engage the warp engines and let's dive into some Star Trek trivia. Okay, guys, diving into my personal logs, which I try to keep highly classified, but it never works. Kevin keeps hacking them. It's bad. But I did find some trivia, and Amy, I'm thinking you really appreciated a certain aspect of the number of sides the nanites ended up having in this episode.
Yes. Well, when they got enlarged with that extra energy, I don't know how to say it.
Icosaridon?
Yes, that one is a 20-sided object. And soccer balls. It's a
No,
20-side. Yeah.
there's that. For a lot of people, though, you know what it reminded people of? Is otherwise, because a lot of people call that, it is otherwise known as the 20-sided die, and is the most commonly used die in the game Dungeons and Dragons. So this was probably the Lower Decks guys' nod to Dungeons and Dragons in this episode. So yeah, that a little bit of fun there. But next up, guys, we talked about it a little bit earlier. As Boimler careened down the target Denoblian, he bumped into the back of an alien with their genitals in exactly the right or maybe wrong place. I mean, where else would they be? Basically, a reference to a similar incident between Captain Kirk and an unknown species on Rura Penthe in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. And let's just say this: Jack Quaid does Boimler Death Falls amazingly well. Also, a little bit of tribute to the old Eddie the Eagle, the famous snow skier, or if you were a wide roller sports fan growing up, the agony of defeat, because of all those crashes. Back in the day in wide roller sports, agony of defeat was a guy always crashing off of a ski jump, and it was always incredibly painful looking. But this was a fun little scene. I got a kick out of this. And it's like, wow, most people die from that fall, but I've never seen nobody over that cliff. Well, I don't have really dense bones, so I'm gonna have to remember that for next time. So there's that. Again, Lower Decks continues to prove its mastery of Star Trek minutia as well, thanks to Jorn Hildebrandt for pointing this out. The vibe tubes we know now know what they're called. A kind of 24th century theorem were first seen briefly in the background at the Café des Artistes in Star Trek The Next Generations Will Always Have Paris. To take that otherwise forgettable detail and transpose it into a character's construct arc and plot resolution, that's a pretty good job by Lower Decks. These guys do like to pull the most minutia, obscure things out and have a little fun with them. Up next, too, guys, I kind of see, was Wesley Crusher asleep on the job again? Because that was a whole heap of nights. Of course, he's still away traveling, but Wesley's moment of youthful inattention did release a bunch of Federation mini-bots aboard the Enterprise D. However, in Evolution, that episode also marked the first use of the words nanites and indeed nanotechnology on screen in Star Trek. In universe, control nanites specifically have already had their way with Leland over a century prior. So again, tying things up, there's got to be a room somewhere that just is Star Trek research for Lower Decks. They got people in there and they just keep them trapped in there. They probably have their own P corner. I'm just saying. But I did find a few other just little fun tidbits. A nanite cluster consuming a ship's raw materials, we talked about this, to expand their size and evolve was the premises of the Next Generation Evolution. Boimler muses whether they will have to wear the black body seen in undercover away missions like that of In Chain of Command Part 1. We finally get to see the Galamites and their transparent skulls. Galamites had previously only been referenced a lot in Star Trek Deep Space Nine in reference to the charming Captain Baudet who dated Jadzia Dax, among others. We also see the crustaceans of Vox Sola and a night in sickbay fame and infamy. The vibe tubes, like I said, were previously seen but not named in Will Always Have Paris. Boimler asked Emerald Milas, voiced by Toby Huss, whether his space whale milking duties were in reference to Gormamander or the galaxy's child space creatures. The other universe's Intrepid class USS Endeavour, commanded by Captain Tercel, still uses the TNG style uniform. Of course, this episode is a homage to the 2001 film The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. And the Cosmic Duchess Hotel looks to be based off the design for Starbase One seen in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So, little interesting things. I'm almost thinking if you want to introduce somebody to the offbeat of Star Trek, you just make them watch Lower Decks and they'll pick up a lot of things, and then things they'll recognize later when they actually revisit binge watching the shows. So I think it's one of the funner things Lower Deck does.
Definitely. There was a lot that I didn't even pick up.
I think with Lower Decks, sometimes it moves so fast, it's intentional that you do not pick up some of those things. So, yeah. But guys, you know what? That wraps up the trivia. But let's get into our second away mission. We're going to take a little bit deeper look into the plot details. So let's teleport into away mission number 2. Okay, guys, away mission number 2. It's our main episode discussion for this week's episode of Lower Decks. And get a little help from our friends over at Trek Core for some of this information I was able to pull up. So thanks to them. But guys, the first topic, how not to handle a breakup, as taught to you by Lower Decks. Many fans were disappointed when the relationship between Mariner and Jennifer was unceremoniously dropped after Jennifer refused to side with Mariner in season 3's trusted sources. Given how few LGBTQ plus relationships there are in Star Trek, a lot of fans have been hoping for better. That didn't necessarily mean that Jennifer and Mariner needed to be together, as established in this episode. It's probably better that they aren't, really, when you look at it. But the dumping of the storyline did not sit right with a number of fans. And it wasn't until Jennifer came in at the beginning of the episode, I'd forgot all about that relationship. So I'm glad they did revisit this. What did you guys think as far as bringing this kind of relationship back and kind of giving it a wrap up in here, because especially with it being the final season? Amy?
Well, I think it's a really smart move on their part, because we are literally watching these characters grow up in their maturity, grow up in rank in Starfleet, and grow up in their relationships. So this is a great, just another part of Mariner's story of her growing up and taking responsibility for her actions. She did not end it. And just because she thinks she does doesn't mean that you do. So I think it was good.
Haley, I'm actually not going to talk to you. I just expect you to know that it's time for you to talk about that plot point.
That's fair. That's fine. No, I completely forgot that they had been in a relationship, and so I was like, oh, okay. And I think it's interesting that they threw in the whole ghosting and not we just don't talk about it, because I think we both think that we broke up, and how often that happens in real life, and because people just they stop talking, but that doesn't mean that your relationship ended necessarily just because you're no longer talking to this person. She's like, I haven't talked to her in months. It's been forever. And and someone could still think that you are in the same place that you were, and that you're still feeling the same way that they feel, and how important that is to be upfront and communicate your changes and your boundaries as well. So while I didn't necessarily need it in a storyline, because obviously I'd forgotten it was a thing anyway, it was, for growth purposes, an important detail.
Amy, I want to ask you this, because being our ship's counselor here, because obviously not only was this a very bad way to end up a breakup, but let's be honest with you, these are two people who don't really know what to do in a relationship, and it's pretty toxic when you think about it, because Mariner just goes silent and does the ghosting thing, while Jennifer, because she's now mad, does this thing where she's just going to try to upset Mariner, get so she can get the result that she wants. I mean, in the end, they both kind of grow out of it. But even at the end of the episode, Jennifer's like, "Wow, my first relationship where I'm never going to speak to my ex again." And it's funny, because we've all been through that probably at some point in our lives. But I mean, this was a high. I'm gonna be honest with you. In my opinion, this was a really high level of toxicity as far as how not to deal with the end of breaking up a relationship. And one of the things I did kind of laugh about too is there was a point where I think it was Rutherford and Tendi were talking about it, and how, especially just because you give the silent treatment doesn't mean you're breaking up, especially the way Starfleet is with away missions, different assignments, transfers, all this stuff. I mean, look at your own parents, Mariner. I mean, so I found that to actually be kind of interesting in the aspect of, it's like there's a lot more to this than them just putting this joke about how they not broke up. Were you seeing that?
Yeah, and it was really good that Rutherford was giving these different examples. Again, you don't want to generalize, but it's like, well, this is another explanation. And so that was really nice that they showed that. And then I also really liked when Jennifer took responsibility for her manipulation of that. So it's not only about Mariner, but she was playing pretend girlfriend just to force the issue instead of talking about it up front, So I really do like how I just sort of have to say in TV general that they're writing more accountability in the characters. And kudos to Star Trek for doing that here.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with it. But guys, I want to move on to the second topic of this week's episode. I'm calling it Boimler continues his journey to be his other self. And since the first episode when Boimler saw the other version of him in the alternate parallel universe, Boimler's been on a little trip here, and we see it even in this episode where he's trying to impress Ransom and everything like that, and of course gets freaked out by what happened to the other ensign and how he uses us as canaries. We have to do all the scary and hard work. But yet, as the episode goes along, you see Boimler kind of, without just being himself, fix the situation, show what his strong character traits are. I don't know if I really need to think about a greased up Boimler ever again, personally, but and then Ransom recognizing it's like the reason why I had you on here was your over preparedness. And again, it seems like it makes sense with, again, going back to the fact that it's the final season, but they really are trying to find ways to mature Boimler, but still keep certain aspects of Boimler there. But you've really seen the character growth this season so far in Boimler, Amy.
Yeah, and one thing that I liked about this it is teaching Boimler and therefore us, like what you think might be a deficiency in your character flaw. And Boimler is definitely doubting and, he's always second guessing himself. But you see it as a character flaw and others see it as a strength. And if you aren't able to recognize what other people see in yourself, swing that look around, that perspective, we get to see him progress. And I lost my thought about it. What was I gonna say? Oh shoot, I'll come back to it.
Hey, Amy, this is what happens when you go AWOL from Starfleet and drink too many happy hour drinks.
No, shoot. Oh, I got it. So he was he was worried that he was all wiry and but that's why Ransom brought him. And so if you can lean into what you think are your deficiencies, that's the uniqueness that makes you stand out, that makes you special, that makes you part of this IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And it's very difficult to lean into a weakness. But if we can, it just changes it, and it changes yourself, your inner self.
Now, Haley, I forgot about this at the beginning of the episode. Did you want me to tell people about your gambling problem?
No.
or is that for next week's Undercover?
That's not Haley. Haley doesn't have that problem. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. No. I enjoyed this part of the episode because, again, I think like Amy said, we are trying to get other characters to show Boimler that he has the skill set within himself. He just has to have the confidence and believe in himself. And like Amy said, it is hard to lean into the discomfort. It's hard to lean into the uncomfortable and the unknown. And so but there's a lot of growth there if you can do that. One thing, because you have this picture up and I just keep thinking it, I love how in continuity, like their shorts are like super super short, because I remember the first time when Picard goes to Risa and he's got like the really short, I'm like, why though? But why? I know like it's a European thing, like the men, they wear the really like the Speedos, the really short shorts when they go to the beach and things. And I don't know if they've pulled that from there, but I just think it's hilarious to see this still continue, that like for some reason they're going to be really short. And it's just great. But I'm liking, Boimler trying to grow, and I do like when Ransom pulls him in for missions, because he continues to doubt himself, but Ransom knows that he has it in him to do great, and he's just trying to help him. For as much as like the first season I was like, Ransom is such a bleep. I do appreciate that, and yeah, so
I think that's what you said about Ransom is actually a good point, Amy, because I really think that, talk about a character who's has grown and evolved, at least in how he treats what the question is that character growth, or is that just we're seeing the character in a different light because the lower decks crew has matured up and they're seeing him in a different light. And I think that's something very interesting, because I do love the Boimler Ransom pairing, because I love the fact that Ransom pushes Boimler, and even though it might seem terrible at the time, he's pushing Boimler to achieve Boimler's full potential. And I really do think that's been, especially in the last 2 seasons, a really big thing. And that's why one of the reasons why I like when they pair up these two characters. But Amy, I would be remiss too if we didn't talk about Boimler's facial growth attempts here.
Yes, his 5 little random hairs. Maybe it was 6.
Yeah, I'm waiting for an episode this season where somebody just finally tells him, "Will you just cut it? Will you just shave? Go shave Boimler."
Well, and you remember last week, it was Rutherford had the scraggle, So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's going on with that.
Well, Rutherford, he was so involved with work that he just wasn't taking care of himself, because he was trying to avoid. Yeah.
Candy. Yeah.
I do want to point out there are people that have a hard time growing facial hair.
Yes.
And I remember Boimler trying to grow facial hair before, and it was weird and awkward, and he just didn't, so he just has a baby face, and the 0.327 difference of the other one is that he doesn't have the baby face. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the episode of Lower Decks this year where Boimler, Vess, and Riker hair grow facial hair. Riker hair grow. We'll call it. But no, a lot of fun with those. But there is one more plot point I want to get to, because I think maybe we are starting to see what might be our run through storyline of the season here, guys, and that is alternate dimensions. This is the second episode so far where we've had a ship either go through a fissure. We've either had the Cerritos go through a fissure, or a Starfleet ship has gone into a fissure and popped out and been stuck in their own dimension. And of course, in this time, it's a dimension where Starfleet's really micronized, apparently. Interesting twist. I honestly was not expecting this at all, but it really does feel like these fissures are going to be a continuing thread throughout the season. Like that, Amy, or you brought up another point before we got started of a certain star base might end up being part of this discussion as well.
Right. With Starbase 80, again, it was mentioned this week. And yeah, the little tiny ships like Deep Space Nine, one little ship, right? So a nod to Deep Space Nine with that. I thought it was really cute. And I'm wondering, like, were we supposed to recognize the Admiral? And are we supposed to recognize, this captain? I'm not. Maybe it will be shown to us more, or maybe these are just new people that we get to know. So I'm curious.
Haley, quantum fissures, they just don't sound healthy.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, Star Trek has had a lot of like the this plot point pop up where, you know, we've had this parallel universes allowed to kind of cross over into what we consistently call the prime universe, because it's the one that we are consistently told stories from. So it's definitely interesting to think about, you know, this tear in space. It takes me back to, you know, the first time we had a potential tear in space, where I love to argue that if they hadn't fixed it, then, you know, we wouldn't have Star Trek, because it would have exploded the entire universe. So anyway, it's definitely a conundrum, because what do we do, and how do we handle these alternate versions of not only ourselves, but other people who might not exist in our timeline because of choices that they made. So they no longer are in our timeline, but they're in another timeline, and they come over. How do we get them back? How did they get over? So it's definitely messy for sure, just because, again, you know, quantum mechanics says, you know, if you go back in time or if you go forward in time, don't affect anything, because that's going to affect the choices. And then you're a deviant off the timeline, and you could end up going back and nothing exists anymore because of some mess that you made. So, you know, it's be a casual observer, but don't interfere, right? So unfortunately, now we have something where they're interfering. They created and got all these nanites together because they were trying to get people to pay attention to them. And now we've got them, but now we've got to get them back into their time, but we don't know where that is, and we don't know where the next fissure is going to happen. So it can mess up with a lot of things, right? So it's a sticky wicket, that's for sure.
So I was thinking about this with these fissures, and I thought about something that, if it were to happen on Lower Decks, it might literally scare me. If we go back to Empress Giorgio's last season on Discovery, where she goes through that portal, and, you know, the Lower Decks people tend to mess with things and they interfere. And what if they interfered with her time traveling back to her proper place in time where they were trying to send her, and she takes a little side detour? I don't know if the Mariner Giorgio team up is something that the Star Trek universe could handle, and I would feel so sorry for Boimler if he had to spend any time with Giorgio at that version of Giorgio. But now there's part of me that just really wants to see that happen.
Kyle, you were get out of my brain. Like, I was going there. A little twist though. So on the view screen this morning, Kelvin was talking about how there was a star date in this episode, and it's linking the end of or Nemesis, and yeah. And then it links now because it's just right before Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
And so this Lower Decks is connecting all of the universe. And what if these time fissures, one of them does connect to the new and upcoming Section 31 movie, that there's some kind of tie-in with Giorgio there because they go into that universe.
Yeah, I don't know what I would be more afraid of. Giorgio with the Lower Decks crew, or getting a true mirror universe version of Lower Decks Boimler. Either of those really kind of make me nervous and scared. And mirror universe, a true mirror universe Mariner would. I don't know what would be there. I almost worry that mirror universe Mariner might be too good. And the opposite of it. So I don't know. It would be fascinating to see. Maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. But the thoughts that cross my mind when, you know, I'm prepping for the show and ideas are going through my head. But yeah, no, Boimler, Giorgio, I would feel bad for Brad. I'll be honest with you. But guys, that is going to wrap up this little away mission. So I'm going to transport us out. And because for some reason Lower Decks can't seem to get any ready room love, Will Wheaton, I'm looking at you, Wheaton, as one Sheldon Cooper would say, that is going to kind of start wrapping us up for this episode of Lower Decks, the best exotic nanite hotel. Hopefully, we've learned a few things about nanites and not to supercharge things around them. Maybe we've learned a little bit about some musical instruments that the Vulcans like, and maybe we learned how to do a proper breakup in a relationship. But guys, it is the 200th episode of the Union Federation, and I would be remiss if I just didn't say what an honor it's been doing these shows with you guys and Kevin and everybody. It's really been an education for me for Trek. I've always been a Trek fan, but not maybe to that deep dive level, and it's really taught me a lot. And seeing everybody here's love for Trek run so deep, it gives me the warm feels too. And for all of us to be on the ride for the Orville together has been as much of a blast. So congratulations to you guys, because this doesn't happen without you. For 200 episodes of the Union Federation podcast, I can't thank you enough as one of the co-founders of the Fandom Podcast Network. You are family. We love you guys, and I'm looking forward to another 200 episodes and at least one more season of the Voyager. Not a Voyager, yeah, of the Orville, and maybe more. Seth, I'm talking to you. I know you're getting sick of the voicemail messages, but. But with that, guys, it is time to close out and intercept subspace signals. So as we continue to wrap up here with the final season of Lower Decks, I just want to, again, what a wonderful crew. Haley, where can people find you on social media?
Well, first of all, yes, congratulations to the network and you guys and all the hard work that goes into this for 200 episodes. It's pretty remarkable and awesome, and I'm so glad to be a part of it and share, this love of Trek with you guys and with the listeners, and it's so much fun. But you can find me lurking in our Facebook group as always. I'm just kind of back in the corner, not the P corner. I'm just in another corner, so you can come and find me. And you can also find me on Blue Sky and Instagram at Trekkie01D.
Amy, where can people find you and everything that's happening on the BQN?
Well, yeah, find me over there on BQN. I'm hosting right now The View Screen, which is our YouTube morning show. That's on Sundays at 9 a.m. Pacific. And then I will be hosting All Good Things, which is talking all of Star Trek. And we talk about the different tropes that appear in each of the series. So it's really fun. And I am on our Facebook group, and so you can find me there as well.
Yeah, everything over there is phenomenal, and like I said, what you've done just in the short time with it, Amy, is fantastic. If you aren't listening to BQN, go get assimilated. It's worth it. It really is. It's not painful at all, or at least that's what Amy tells everybody. And of course, too, here on Lower Decks, it's all here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Of course, if you're watching on our YouTube channel, please give us a like, a subscribe, and share it out. If you're listening on one of those amazing podcast catchers out there, whether it's our homepage at fpnet.podbean.com or iTunes or iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you can find it. We're all over the place. It's crazy. Please just give it a listen. Enjoy it, because that's what we're here to do, is put a little bit of joy into your day, whether it's Trek-wise, Orville-wise, or just the little craziness here altogether. Of course, my name is Kyle. You can find me anywhere on our Fandom Podcast Network pages, including the Union Federation page and the Facebook page for Fandom Podcast Network. You can also find me on X at AKyleW. I'm also on Discord at AKyleW. And you can also find me on Threads and Instagram at AKyleFandom. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Kevin Reitzel, who did a phenomenal job helping me with the notes, even though he is on vacation in Australia. He also put together this great slideshow. We appreciate you, Kevin. Can't wait for you to get back and join us for the back half of Lower Decks conversations, because we know you love hanging out with the Lower Deckers. They're your kind of people. But a shout out to him, and of course he is the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network as well. I do have to do a quick shout out to, I mentioned it a little earlier, this show doesn't exist without Norman Lau, who's one of our co-founders, who's gone on, of course, now doing things with the Roddenberry Network and Mission Log. But he was the Scoville, the original iteration of the show was his brainchild, and so we wouldn't be here without you. We love you, Norman. we miss you, and we know we're going to get you back on for some more things here at the Fandom Podcast Network soon. But guys, it has been a blast talking about Lower Decks with you guys, and we got 7 more episodes left here. It's going to be a fun ride. And before we get out of here, as always, I just try to say this anyway. Fandom Podcast Network. Respect each other. Enjoy your fandom. But guys, we are going to get out of here because even though we might be the craziest ship in the fleet, even we need a little bit of a break. So from here on out, hailing frequencies for this week, guess what? They're closed.